Homeschooling and education. The schools must fashion the person, and fashion him in such a way that he simply cannot will otherwise than what you wish him to will. Education should aim at destroying free will, so that after pupils are thus schooled, while they will be incapable throughout the rest of their lives of thinking or acting otherwise than as their schoolmasters would have wished. The education must consist essentially in this, that it completely destroys freedom of will in the soil which it undertakes to cultivate, and produces on the contrary strict necessity in the decisions of the will, the opposite of being impossible. Such a will who can henceforth be relied on with confidence and uncertainty. Johann Gottlieb Fichte, creator of the Prussian schooling philosophy. And he had even more to say. Address to the German nation. 99 students out of 100 are automata, careful to walk in prescribed paths, careful to follow the prescribed custom. This is not an accident, but the result of substantial education, which, scientifically defined, is the subsumption of the individual. The Philosophy of Education by William Torrey Harris. In our dream, the people yield themselves with perfect docility to our molding hand. We shall not try to make these people or any of their children into philosophers or men of learning or of science. We are not to raise up among them authors, orators, poets, or men of letters. We shall not search for embryo of great artists, painters, musicians, nor will we cherish even the humbler ambition and to raise up from among them lawyers, doctors, preachers, politicians, statesmen, of whom we now have ample supply. For the task that we set before ourselves is a very simple, as well as a very beautiful one. To train these people as we find them for a perfectly ideal life just where they are. An ideal life under disguise and within the horizon, however narrow, where they first open their eyes. Country School of Tomorrow by Frederick Taylor Gates. I maintain that the civil authorities are under obligation to compel the people to send their children to school. If the government can compel such citizens as are fit for military service to bear their spear and rifle and perform other martial duties in time of war, how much has it a right to compel the people to send their children to school? Because in this case we are warring with the devil, whose object it is secretly to exhaust our cities and principalities of their strong men. Martin Luther. Our schools are, in a sense, factories, in which the raw products children are to be shaped and fashioned into products. That's to meet the various demands of life. The specifications for manufacturing come from the demands of 20th century civilization, and it is the business of the school to build its pupils according to the specifications laid down. Public School Administration by Elwood Copley. Luther understood that compulsory schooling could be used to indoctrinate young minds into the Lutheran Church, and sought to use state power to achieve this end. As a result of his pleadings, numerous German states created the first modern public schools. In many ways, Martin Luther can be thought of marking the birth of the modern schooling system. Not only was he the first advocate of compulsory schooling, but his conviction that the state should use its power to indoctrinate its citizens into a specific worldview helped stimulate Germany in a climate of increasing subjugation to the state. The great historian Lord Acton wrote of Martin Luther that he impressed on his party that character of political dependence and that habit of passive obedience to the state. Another important step in the rise of modern public schooling arose under King William I of Prussia, who ruled from 1713 to 1740. integral to the maintenance of Prussia's powerful army during his reign was the national compulsory schooling system that he established in 1717, the first of its kind in Europe. Subsequent schooling reforms throughout the 18th century built on this foundation and paved the way towards the development of what became known as the factory model of schooling. The factory model of schooling emphasizes standardization of teaching, testing, and learning rates, respect for authority over the exploration of truth, and uniformity and orthodoxy over innovation and progress. This schooling model, developed by the Prussians, was so efficient in calculating to its citizens a worldview which benefited the Prussian state that in the 19th century, the educational reformers in the United States caught wind of it and quickly sought to implement it in their home country.
Let's talk about education. In most Western countries, school is compulsory and state enforced. Truancy can result in fines or even jail time for parents. This isn't just a result of state coercion. On a cultural level, education holds a sacred status much like that of religion. This is an institution that most never question, and that's a problem. Did you ever wonder how it is that kids spend 13 years from kindergarten to high school supposedly being prepared for life, yet when they get out, they don't have any real skills? 13 years and kids aren't taught how to grow a garden, how to build a house, how to fix a car, how to balance a checkbook, or how to cook a healthy meal. 13 years and kids come out without even rudimentary concepts of how to organize or lead groups of people, without even a glimmer of understanding of how to resolve conflicts nonviolently. And we call this an education? Yes, we're taught how to read and write and to perform some basic math, but we aren't taught how to think for ourselves. We aren't taught the principles of logic or how to question an ideology. What we are taught is how to sit at a desk and listen obediently as the world is packaged into a neat little box that we are to accept without question. We're taught to regurgitate that information for test, to give the answer that those in authority demand, but most of all, we're conditioned to conform. And the reward for faithfully jumping through all of these hoops for 13 years is a worthless piece of paper that no employer even asks to see. Kids exit high school barely qualified to flip burgers at McDonald's, and even for that, they have to be trained. 13 years is a long time. That's most of our childhood. To have this much time taken by force with such pathetic results is unacceptable. The problem here isn't a lack of funding. The problem here isn't poorly trained teachers, lax regulations, or low quality curriculum. The problem is our entire educational paradigm. The system isn't designed to prepare children for the real world. It's designed to format their minds and condition them for a life of subservience. It's designed to create a population of individuals just smart enough to fill out paperwork and punch a time card, but too stupid to question the system itself or the authority of those running it. If we want to change course, we cannot ignore this aspect of our enslavement. There's no point laboring to wake up other adults in our lives if we send our children to be programmed by the state. The revolution of the mind must include a revolution in education. If this is a message you feel the public needs to hear, then be sure to like, favorite, and share this video through as many avenues as possible. If you want more videos like this, be sure to subscribe to this channel, Storm Clouds Gathering, on
This Quora writer, Dennis Pratt's answer to the Quora question, why are schools politically liberal? The word liberal has been replaced with leftist in order to avoid confusion. A different master for the schools. Imagine if the NRA had the power to school our children. The NRA opened NRA schools in every town. The NRA compelled our children to attend their NRA schools. The NRA forced taxpayers to pay for them. The NRA created the curriculum for teacher colleges. The NRA decided the requirements for teachers to graduate. The NRA selected which teachers went where. The NRA decided promotions and raises. The NRA decided the curriculum for our children. The NRA decided what should be in the text. The NRA required students to pledge allegiance to the NRA every morning. The NRA posted pictures of past NRA presidents in every classroom. The NRA gave days off to celebrate NRA holidays. The NRA regularly had NRA speakers at the school. The schools tracked NRA news. Every student took heavy doses of NRA civics. Every student learned about the important role that the NRA plays in protecting our freedoms. The students memorized the cities in each state where the NRA had its state headquarters. Human history was taught through the scope of guns. Essay questions often ended with, describe how guns could solve this problem. What result would we expect? Would we be surprised to find all schools generally pro-guns? Would we be surprised to find graduates of these schools with major gun purchases and with lots of practice firing? Would we be surprised to hear the next generation talk to us passionately about the importance of guns in our life? Whose pictures would an NRA school display for revering? So when the government does this today, what should we expect? When schools are owned and run by the government on government property, paid for by the government, staffed by government workers, overseen by government, and we have no say and rather our child or money goes to them, we should not be surprised that they rationalize government control of our lives. We expect that religious schools will indoctrinate their religion. Government is just another religion. Yet we act confused when we see government schools producing wave upon wave of pro-government drones. It's almost like our brains had been programmed not to see a connection. I wonder when and that might have happened. The government schools teach allegiance to the government was no surprise in Sparta, where young boys were taken from their parents and raised in Spartan schools to be fully indoctrinated as warriors for the Spartan state. It was not a surprise when Prussia reinstituted government schooling on the Spartan model, because Prussia was tired of losing wars and wanted to instill blind obedience to the Prussian state. Just a few decades after the introduction of Spartan schooling into Prussia, tens of millions of young men were willing to become obedient and cannon fodder for their fatherland, enabling the carnage of both World War I and World War II. And it was this Spartan Prussian model that Horace Mann consciously brought over to America to impose on our children. I get the most sad when people are saying that we need government schools to teach our children about freedom. There cannot be two concepts further apart, and yet somehow people schooled in government schools pared it back. I wonder how that happened. The same mechanism would be used to make schools politically conservative. I think I was talking only about the mechanism and not how leftists, in many instances, want control of the mechanism. I'll have to take your comment under advisement. The mechanism of government-imposed, government-run education camps is available to any authoritarian. Look at the conservative method that Sparta and Prussia used it, to create drone armies happy to die for their leader. Perhaps it is that in the US, leftists are much more authoritarian than conservatives. I was actually playing around with some political grinds, and the old school fundamentalists are much less powerful today. However, there are places, e.g. in the South, where the same mechanism is actively used by the local fundamental conservatives for an analogous outcome. There the question would have to be, why are schools politically conservative? I had a elevation one trip around the South. I came upon group after group of leftists who were so angry that their schools were politically fundamentalist conservative. I thought that I had an inroad to talk about freedom of choice and in schooling, allowing lots of alternatives and parents choosing the best school for their child and their family. Of course, this would allow these leftist minorities to have a choice for their child which matches their values. However, and this was the eye-opener for me, the leftists rejected freedom of choice. Instead, they were bound and determined to capture the indoctrination mechanism themselves in order to save the children from the values of their children's parents. Just so you know, I had a similar result in conservative minority communities who were upset by the overwhelming leftist schools. They seemed to be less interested in 1,000 lights than they were in making sure all the lights were red or blue or whichever color they wanted everyone else to be. The mechanism is effective, and that's why we have these great battles over who should control the school experience of my child and your child. My solution is to allow many different types of schools such that no sub-community feels oppressed, but I feel that many people want to oppress. Government-run schools are the perfect mechanism. And another comment. I find it amazing, Barbara, that the people who are supposed to be teaching our children how to take their place cannot solve the problem faced by every single company and by every one of their tiny competitors who's battling the big monopolists. The only solution that they can come up with is using threats of violence to get their money, artificially keeping out alternatives and forcing parents to pay even when they don't want the service. Let's be glad that a few of the graduates of these schools were able to figure out what that seems to be an intractable problem for government bureaucrats. If they can't figure out how such a common invariable cost problem, how can we ever expect them to solve the demand problem of serving customers so much better that they don't want to escape?
Let me close this off by addressing the belief that Americans are the world's dumbest people. I don't think that Americans are the dumbest people in the world, but rather we have a wide bell curve in terms of intelligence. Maybe the widest thanks to combining a large, diverse population with an individualistic culture. In other words, America has both the dumbest people in the world and the most brilliant people in the world. Our cultural father, Britain, is the same way. Japan, by comparison, has a tighter bell curve, in which hardly anyone is pathetically dumb, and at the same time, hardly anyone is outstandingly, exceptionally brilliant. I got that from Dawson and Illingworth on China, starting at 57 minutes and ending at 1 hour, 2 minutes, 40 seconds. Please support the Substack blogs America vs. Europe and the World and Arguments Against Leftism. Here's my social media link tree, which I ask that you keep archive. You keep the link and archive my content. And please.